The device itself consists of two parts. There is a part which is inserted into the thigh and has a ball on the top, and accurately matched to this is a cup with a very long threaded stem, so that you have a total articulation. These two parts move easily one upon the other. Now they're inserted as two separate units. This is an example of the pelvic bone here, and the cup section is screwed into position in the pelvis after preparing a track. The important feature of this track is that it lies along the weight-bearing line of the pelvis, so that we run this cup in a position in which its stem is subjected to little or no stress on weight-bearing, and we sink the cup into a specially prepared cone in the socket here of the thigh, so that it is deeply set in the bone and almost completely hidden from view. This then is the upper part of the joint. The lower part is produced by this component, which is inserted into the thigh in this way and lies in the top of the thigh after removing the upper end of the bone, which is normally, of course, grossly disorganized.
Well, we can see the long-range benefit of making more camping available for more girls in the future. A main lodge is always the main building, the focal point of any camp, and I think it will give the girls great pride and in their organization, and many things will happen at the main lodge. In addition to the eating facilities there will be this program center and museum library which is attached, and I think that much Girl Scout program can take place here.
Well, there'll be two levels of benefit. First, to the operational law enforcement agencies, to the police, the courts, and to the corrections. The prosecutor, actually going through a trial. The judge, who must decide whether or not to grant bail to an individual who's been charged with a crime. The police officer out on the beat, who detains a suspect and wants to determine probable cause to make a formal arrest. If he has access in a matter of seconds to that individual's criminal history or lack of criminal history, this will give him a lot of information needed to determine whether or not there is probable cause to make arrest.
Jerry's brother had talked to someone in the DA's office, and they were talking on the phone, and they said, well, sir, you know you're fighting with the Big Daddy. In other words, that we're fighting more or less the police department and not Tom Hogan himself. He said that we would have to hire a private investigator out of a bigger city, and he named Houston as one. What I really want is to clear Jerry's name, because anyone that knew him knew that he wasn't the type of person that would prowl into anybody's business or even their home. And I just want his name cleared, whether it would hurt Tom Hogan or not. I want my husband's name cleared.
I'm hopeful that this represents a peak. I can't help but believe that the first quarter of next year, and certainly by the second quarter of next year, we should commence to see some upturns in the general level of the economy. And I think the recent elections indicated that the people have a deep concern about the well-being of the economy, and I rather look for our officials, wherever they may be, to address themselves to this problem.
Thank you.
That impressed me most about the men and their work was their humanness. They went about it as men that really were human rather than being the hard people that sometimes we think them to be. The second was the proficiency or the efficiency with which they went about their work.
We wanted to give you a better understanding of the police role, the police officer as an individual, and some of the problems which he encounters, and to give you a better understanding in that respect so that you can better relate to your congregation. And hopefully down the road, this will bring about a better understanding from them about the police and their role, and support from them in ways which we must have.
You know, this just has to be one of the most beautiful days of the new fall season. the gorgeous blue sky. Mother Nature couldn't have done a better job than she did with this tree we're standing under. But this is not such a beautiful day for another 1,800 employees here at Texas Instruments, many of them from this building you see behind us. 2 buildings were affected in the latest of the layoffs, and this brings to 3,000 the number of jobless here at Texas Instruments since September 23rd, when 1,200 were told not to come back. The reason? Texas Instruments says it's a continuing softness in customer orders in the semiconductor division. Where this will lead, of course, the company does not know. They say it all depends on the economy. A company spokesman told me this morning that they thought September's layoffs would be it. And when pressed for the future, they said, well, today should be it. But again, it all depends on the economy. But when you walk down through the parking lots or drive through, you can see that there are still a great number of people employed here at Texas Instruments, although it is my speculation that 3,000 represents about 15% of the Dallas workforce. The overall worldwide employment of Texas Instruments stands at 48,000. However, that too is down 10,000 just over the last 9 months. TI, the county's largest employer, also affected once again by the softness of this economy. From Texas Instruments, this is Jim Mitchell, Channel 8 News on the Move.
It's the same old story. We've gone to college now. When are you ever going to let us grow up? There are laws that apply to the kids who didn't come to college. Why don't those same laws apply to us? The issue this time at SMU is alcohol, and the resolution as introduced tonight before the University Assembly points out that there are already state laws dealing with the use of alcohol. You can't buy or sell alcohol in the city of University Park anyway. Now, the real issue is it likely that you're going to be able to bring alcohol onto the campus at SMU for consumption if you are over 21? The state law says you can. There is a state law which says you cannot bring alcohol onto a state-supported campus, but it does not apply necessarily to private institutions like SMU. The resolution introduced tonight says specifically, each member of the SMU community is individually and personally responsible for compliance with the laws as written for the city of the University Park and the state of Texas. In order to provide maximum opportunity for effective self-regulation, which will protect the interests of all members of the community at SMU, each residence unit should adopt and maintain regulations regarding the use of alcohol and should make its members comply. Alcoholic beverages may not be used by members of the community on campus, except within the interior of campus residences, the Student Center, and the CPL, and all social functions in which alcoholic beverages are served. Non-alcoholic beverages must also be served, and violations of these alcoholic beverage regulations, as of other university regulations, shall be subject to discipline through regular procedures. The resolution as introduced tonight probably will not be passed tonight. It will have to be referred to a committee. It goes on to say, however, that it is emphasized that when alcoholic beverages are used, you shouldn't get drunk, that you should not behave in a disorderly manner because of alcohol or for any other reason while you're representing the SMU community. Jerry Taft, Channel 8 News on the Move at SMU.
American Manufacturing Company is said not to be in compliance with the Texas Clean Air Act. And according to information gathered for the Texas Air Control Board for hearings this week in Fort Worth, American Manufacturing Company emits effluents up to 6 times more than allowed by the Texas Air Control Board, and on an average of more than 2.5 times considered as a safe level of pollution. That information was released in a hearing this morning at the Public Health Center in Fort Worth. The attorney representing American Manufacturing, Richard Simon, says the emissions of the company are infinitesimal in comparison with the automobiles and voiced the opinion that American manufacturing is just convenient to controls or a scapegoat to the real source of pollution problems. Mr. Simon said he intends to ask the Texas Air Control Board in Austin, December 10th, to grant American manufacturing a variance in effluents emitted into the air. Cecil Bradford of the Texas Department of Health Air Control Program recommended today that American manufacturing should be forced to meet air pollution regulations immediately. Bradford made the same recommendations yesterday for McKinley Iron and Steel, and Trinity Valley Iron and Steel Company must appear before the hearing next Friday for alleged air pollution violations. The final report to the Texas Air Control Board will be given by hearing examiner Evelyn Cavallo, who is presiding over the Fort Worth hearings. Jim Green, Channel 8 News, on the move, Fort Worth.
On the south side of the Trinity River, in that area that's cleared now, that is, well, it isn't really used too much. It's used by some people, but I think it'd be used better for 1 million people than it would be for 5,000.
Percentage-wise, what would this do to the size of the Forest Park Zoo?
Oh, it would just, it'd make it in the class of, say, the San Antonio Zoo, which is one of the finest zoos in this part of the world. Dallas has a fine zoo, too. And all we're trying to do is just keep pace.
Well, the real majority, in terms of political opinion, would be those 2/3 or 3/4 of the American people who are sort of found between the 35-yard lines of the political football field. They're not down at the 11-yard line on one side or the 6.5-yard line on the other. They are moderate, middle of the road, centrist. They are in both political parties and in no political party. They are, I suppose you could say, they're the middle-minded in America. The effect that they had on these last elections, well, they tended to split fairly evenly between Republicans and Democrats. They also tended to, in some instances at least, many of this middle group, to vote for both parties, in the sense that they would vote for a Reagan and a Tunney in California, or they would vote for a Sargent and a Kennedy in Massachusetts. They would elect one Republican and one Democrat to the top 2 jobs. So I'd say they're right about where they always were, in the middle.
We're hopeful, of course, that it's a commodity that won't tend to the success of a boycott such as grapes did, because we all feel that boycotting is unfair. It's an unfair manner. It's unfair to the consumer, it's unfair to the farmer, it's unfair to the people that are working in the fields, due to the fact that it forces an employee to sign a contract without them having any chance to vote to see if they so desire. The most unfair aspect of it, in my estimation, is to the people that are working out there.
Coach, any observations on the Tech game?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of observation. You know, we studied the film yesterday and studied again this morning and graded it, and we broke down in certain positions, but I don't think you can put your finger on any one thing except possibly 2 or 3 fumbles that had cost us in critical situations. So we were beaten by a good Texas Tech team. I think they got a fine team. They're well organized, well disciplined, and do a great job. And our boys are real disappointed that we didn't win this game, but they gave a good effort.
Any serious injuries come out of it?
Well, not any more than we already had. Irving Garnett was hurt when we went in the game, and he is going to be operated on this week for a knee injury. And then, of course, Steve Judy is limping, but he's all right. And then most of the rest of it is just bumps and bruises.
Well, I only can hope that the extension of the ceasefire can at least establish a nucleus for or basis for further extensive negotiations to solve this problem peacefully according to the resolution of the Security Council and according to the American Rogers initiative to stop shooting and start talking.
Well, the need for council action would be just to put in the necessary money to go ahead so we can complete the new master plan. Now, the old master plan did not include the needs that we have for today. The needs that we have for today are naturally, we didn't even think about them in 1962, and we need to expand and to do an open air type zoo because this is what people like. You can go just on the other side of Dallas and see whether they like a drive-through zoo or not. And so but I've been trying to get this done for 10 years.
How much expansion are we talking about?
We're talking about 25 or 30 acres.
Well, I think this is true, that in all the surveys that are run, if you take an emergency room and decide what are the true emergencies, this varies from 5 to 20% are true emergencies. The other, so 80 to 95% are not true emergencies. They're really walk-in clinic problems, and they're the sort of things that would end up in the doctor's office if there was a doctor who had his office open at 1 o'clock in the morning, but there just isn't. So these people need care. They have to turn someplace, but they're not truly emergencies.
Well, I'm disappointed, but I don't think it's the last stand that we can take to get something done about the equitable ad valorem, about having equity in the ad valorem tax and taking the structure that the ad valorem tax acts upon and applies and get this load off of property. It's not fair. And we're very disappointed that the Teachers Association took a stand the way they did because it's so unfounded and really doesn't have a whole lot of validity to it.
You don't believe Amendment 3 would harm the school districts that much?
It wouldn't harm them at all. My idea on that is that the government should get out and stay out, but I think that it ought to take them 5 to 10 years to phase it out so that it won't break every small farmer that we've got left.
Can you tell us about any plans in the beefing up of the burglary division or what you plan to do to try to halt this?
Yes, we are going to beef up our program in that area. We presently have the vacancies for that. This will ultimately call for transfer from other divisions, both within the jail and in patrol, and after some specialized studies to go in this area. So While we're talking about this, we're also talking about the need for additional officers at the Dallas County Sheriff's Office. We do have positions open, and we'd like to talk to all young men who are qualified, like to have the law enforcement as their profession to come in and see us.
There are many, many things, such as the treatment of minor injuries, the things requiring 1 or 2 stitches, the treatment of minor colds, or even the triage or separation of patients out that can be adequately performed by a well-trained nurse. I believe that the training programs exist, and if the doctors get busy and provide the information and the guidance that they need, and at the same time if the legislators will see the need for permitting other people to participate in health care, I think that a well-trained nurse can offer an amazing, and I should say an astounding degree of service, which heretofore she hasn't been allowed to give.
What would have to be done to allow nurses to perform even minor medical services?
Well, I think the first thing, Mr. Thomas, would be to change the Nursing Practice Act, which usually is a state act and most often prohibits nurses from making diagnoses or providing treatment. They're restricted to the provision of nursing care. We all know that over the years nurses have not done this. They are forced by their situation, by the places where they work and the circumstances, to do a little diagnosing and a little treating. They do a good job of it, and many times they receive no thanks from anybody except the patient.
Promises, promises, promises. The parents of the children in the Shady Oaks area are fed up with promises. What they want is a bridge here. One mother called Contact 8 out of sheer frustration, and a group of parents plan to share their upset with the Dallas City Council on Monday. The residents say that it is now 8 months since the bridge was torn out, and no work has begun on a replacement. This bridge is the only natural route for the children on this side who go to the F.P. Callier Elementary School. Without it, the children have to go 8 blocks out of their way onto Marsh Lane, a busy, hectic 6-lane thoroughfare. What happened, it seems, is that some of the homeowners on one side of the creek immediately adjacent to the bridge objected to the proposed design. They refused the city the right-of-way, so negotiations took place. Finally, a new design has been agreed upon, but the new design alters the work so much that the contractor feels that it's a whole new project that's been instituted. The Public Works Department now is aiming to split the work on the creek and offer the bridge work here to new bidding and a new contractor. That could be another month before that bidding is held. And if that were not enough, when I called to check on the situation, one Public Works official explained that even if the bridge were begun, it couldn't be totally completed because to complete the bridge completely would cut off all the other access to other necessary work on the creek. But back to the children. What it amounts to is a classic case of homeowner versus city versus homeowner, with the children in the middle still having to use Marsh Lane, a busy, hectic 6-lane thoroughfare to go to school. That's Contact 8. This is Teal Salon.